Hi everyone, welcome back to the Y Music Festival. I am Nate and I am joined today by Kapil Seshasayee. I'm really happy to see you here. How are you doing? Oh, we've got you muted. 1 second. We'll do that one again. Hi everyone, welcome back
Can you hear
to
me
the
now?
Y Music Festival. Perfect.
All
I am
right,
Nate and
yeah,
I
that
am
was
joined
my
today
fault, my
by
bad.
Kapil
4 years after the
Seshasayee. I'm
pandemic, and I'm still
really
muting myself in calls.
happy
It is what it
to
is.
see you here. How are you doing?
No, I'm grand. Thank you so much for having me. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. I'm very good. We've had a very rich day so far. I know you're definitely gonna add to it. So
Here's hoping. Here's hoping.
before we carry on, just to give people a flavor of what you do, I'm gonna play a short clip, and then we'll go on from there.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
All right, here we go. One clip. Where are you? There you are. Okay. Amazing. I think you're the on your website it says visual artist, right?
Hmm?
And I do want to ask later, like what do you mean by that? But I encourage anyone, if you're listening, especially, to check out that track and check out the music video because the visuals are stunning and they say a
That
lot.
Yeah, it's interesting that that's the one you chose. For those who aren't aware, I am mostly known for my live guitar playing these days. Specifically, like I do a bit of an Indian classical fusion thing, but that video harks back to a time where I was into loads of like hyperpop, specifically the band 100 Gex. I want to channel that in what I was doing. But going back to the visual, that was a collaboration I did with an amazing video production company up here called Production Attic, and I take a lot of inspiration from my visuals from typography and like I mean you can see what I'm wearing. I like I like text, so that art. And it's funny that you chose that clip because it's a really good vehicle for my visual style, but my musical style goes around the place. But I'm glad you chose that one. I mean, I can go more into why I chose those visuals for the track, or we can start at the beginning. How would you like to do it?
Let's start at the beginning. Let's start with a
Yeah,
couple
go
of
for it.
fire questions just so people get a sense of who you are. So
Yeah, go for it. Go for it.
what is your favorite board game of all time?
My favorite board game of all time is chess because when I was really young, me and my dad would play it all the time. And before I actually got good at any sports, it was the closest thing to a sport I was good at, even though we didn't have a ball in it. And now, as an adult, I've reconnected with a couple of friends who play chess as well. And we don't get to go to the pub as often as we used to because we're both busy working, but we'll play a bit of chess back and forth. So probably chess, I'd say.
Nice. Um, what did you growing up? Did you have any idea of what you wanted to be?
When I was really young, I wanted to be a vet because I liked the idea of like looking after people or animals particularly, and like, making people feel better, making living things feel happier day to day, which I kind of do with music. I've not completely lost my way. I started playing the guitar age 12, so I was very young when I decided, all right, music's the thing I'm going to do, and specifically the medium of the electric guitar as well. So yeah, it's been some decades since that moment, but yeah, very much on the same path I set out on.
Nice. And random one. What
Hmm?
what would be your ideal holiday destination?
Oh, this one's really easy to answer because I had a pandemic wedding and we actually met through my now wife, and we didn't get to go on our honeymoon for 4 years, or sorry, 3 years, I should say, because of the pandemic. And we got to go to Japan, and I don't even need to imagine ideal holiday destination because that trip ticked every single box. You know, streetwear, food, just amazing things to do, like vistas, everything. So Japan, Tokyo specifically, but yeah, favorite holiday, best place. Anyone who can go should go. Most incredible place, honestly.
It's definitely on my bucket list. Definitely. Um, so like on your website, right? Like many people have websites. Many people, even if they don't have websites, Instagram or wherever, and you've got a little bio that kind of gives a snapshot into who you are, or even what you do, right? And on yours, you've put art rock slash Indian classical slash R&B musician and visual artist. So like, what does that mean to you to write that down like that? What does that all mean to you?
I think for me, it's like trying to capture how scatterbrained I am, but also, catapult the ambition onto the page as well, right? Because, you heard a little snippet there that owed a little bit to R&B, a lot to like hyper pop and stuff like that. But then anyone who doesn't know my music is like, why is he talking about the electric guitar so much? That doesn't seem to be a much of a factor in the music I just heard. So I have quite a broad range of influences. I mean, there's some key ones, and like I've been very lucky to play with some of my influences as well very recently, like the band Tenari example, for example. But it's like that descriptor is me trying to get. It's funny because I think I would describe myself. I'd probably not use the art rock descriptor as much for where the music's going next, but it's certainly a good descriptor for the music that's currently available. And like, I wanted to make it obvious where I was coming from and where I was going. And that's where using art rock, using Indian classical, a big influence in what I do. And the visual art thing is that, I make political music, but you can't really have that exist in a vacuum. You need that visual aspect of it as well. And I I've been in visual. I've been doing my own visuals for years, like a lot of my own artworks, all my designs and stuff. Like a lot of my t-shirt designs, record sleeves, they all feature very distinctive typographic design that I, often create myself. And I work really closely with a photographer called Sean Patrick Campbell, based in Glasgow, who's amazing. And a lot of it's translating a vision onto a page. So yeah, I think that the three things I want to get across are where I'm coming from, that's the Indian classical thing, where I'm going, that's some of the art rock stuff. And the visual art is summing up that my work doesn't just go one medium. I'm a musician, but I also have to bring that visual aspect to bring that political narrative to my stuff to life as well.
Absolutely. Like you strike me as someone, and maybe people are picking up on this as well. You strike me as someone who potentially, and I'm obviously projecting a lot here, but someone who's got a lot going on in your mind, a lot of different ideas and thoughts and feelings and colors and shapes, and you're trying to get it out in the best way possible. So like, could you like walk through just a bit of that process of what it is to conceptualize something and then slowly it coming out on paper? Or
Yeah, sure. You've actually picked a really good example. The track that you played a bit of, it's called Rupture of the Wheel. And it's from my concept album about Bollywood. And specifically, the song tells the story of how in India, up until the past few years, they used to play the Indian national anthem before Bollywood films to kind of drum up nationalist rhetoric. And it's customary to stand for the national anthem before a Bollywood film plays. But this nationalist rhetoric got so heightened and it went so far that a man in a wheelchair was assaulted for not standing up for the national anthem. And you're probably thinking that happened 60 years ago, 70 years ago, time has changed. No, that happened in 2016. So, you know, I wanted to get across that, I'm really committed to disability rights as well. My parents are both disabled and have a really vested interest in that. But I also wanted to get across that kind of, I'm a leftist musician. Anti-nationalism is a big part of what I do. And trying to get those both across, I needed to conceptualize what I wanted to do and the best medium by which to show it. So I have a song called Rupture of the Wheel that revolves around this anecdote about a man in a wheelchair being assaulted for not standing up for the national anthem. And I thought, how am I going to get that out in a song? You played a really good part of it for me to explain this, because the intro to the song features the melody to the national anthem. It's like a little Easter egg. And it's got just enough differences, so I can't be done for copyright, but it's like close enough that you get a bit of a, like, I've played that song at festivals like Dialed in London and at the Roundhouse, and brown people in the audience are like, oh, the intro makes me kind of nostalgic, but I don't know why. No, it's because it's the national anthem, and that's what the song's about. And for me, maybe to somebody listening or watching, that might be way too on the nose, right? But for me, it's like you kind of need to be on the nose sometimes. So I have all these ideas that I want to get across: the anti-national aspect, the the pro-disability rights aspect, how it's all linked to Bollywood and how it's going to be on the concept album about Bollywood. But in addition to that, I'm also like, oh, but I love Arca and 100 Gex and all this other stuff, but I still want to bring like an Indian vibe to it. How do I do all of the above? I think for me, it's like finding the simplest medium to translate each aspect of it, right? For me, it's like, okay, I want a little Easter egg. Because growing up, the music I loved was music with Easter eggs in it. And if you found one, you felt like you'd won a little prize, or like, oh, this is a reference to this and that. And I love a lyric that references something else that I've had to read about. Some people find that tedious. I think of it as good world building. So each to their own. Yeah, for that specific song, it's taking these key themes. People often say that I write a song like I'm writing an essay about something. I think of my music as like sonic essays on a topic. Like, what do I want to get across? Here's my paragraph plan, and how do I get it on paper? That's the song itself. And, it's a really fun tune that people often request in my live sets when I ask my fans, what do you want to hear next in the set? That song's always going to be there. But it's like, to know that I can get all those concepts out and still have them all land was a really satisfying feeling. So that's a little window into my process. Usually I'll make a little wish list of what I want to do and marry that up with the best process of getting each individual theme out. Like, hey, how do I get that kind of set the scene kind of thing? I usually try and go, how do I reference the anecdote I'm trying to tell in some way? Like, I have a song about a folk singer called Bant Singh, who's from the north of India, where Bhangra originates from. And I thought, I'm going to write a song about him and his bravery, but I'm going to give the song like a Bhangra like rhythm. And often people say the same thing. They're like, oh, this song makes me really nostalgic. It reminds me of like Punjabi folk music. And I'm like, oh, that's not a coincidence. Like, I meant to do that so that it would set the scene in the north of India with that North Indian folk music vibe, and then it brings in the story of the singer, etc. So for me, I'm always trying to reference stuff like that to try and draw people into the story in a more vivid way, right? Because at the end of the day, it's not about showing it off. It's not about name dropping. It's about how can I communicate what I need to communicate in the best way possible and get people listening, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think you saying that reminds me of a conversation just had with another composer, Cassie Kanoshi, who talked about composing being communication essentially. And so it's just about how you communicating something to an audience, because 9 times out of 10 you don't know who the audience is going to be, right? You have an idea of the actual stuff, but once it's out there, anyone can not anyone, but many people can access.
Yeah, I think that a big sea change for me was I used to think I made millennial music or music for people my age, when it's the exact opposite. Like, a lot of my biggest fans are like 20, and I have to reconcile being in my 30s, but also having my music I mean, I didn't set out to do that, but connecting with people and then realizing, okay, well, you can make the music you want, but you have to communicate it in such a way that the people who like your music the most can engage with it. And for me, that's social media. Like, for anyone who is enjoying this conversation and wants to hear more, like, I'm very active on social media. I do video essays. I do a lot of deep dives into why I write the songs I write. I cover a lot of different topics, but a lot of the videos, they take an almost like meme-like quality. Like, I'll supercut a silly clip with me singing a song, and if that's the best way to communicate the song, that's going to be how I do it. And I think there was a part of me that's like, oh, it feels like I'm not making it serious enough. But it's like, well, if you make people laugh and then you engage them on an important topic, you've won way more than if you're lecturing them or you're punching down. So I think a lot of it is taking the ego out and going, right, how do I communicate this via this song or this essay, this talk, this video? And it must be the same for yourself, though, right? You're trying to figure out, for a changing landscape beneath our feet, how do we stay still? How do we stay grounded, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for for me and maybe for many others, it is that thing of I want to say this, but how do I say it? Do I say it in a way that is kind of I put my blinkers on and I just say whatever I want to say, or do I think actually if I want to engage with you or with you, how do I tailor it so that you might actually not be put off by the title, or you might be intrigued by the title, or you might not be put off after 2 minutes versus 20 minutes, depending on what you're trying to do. And I think one of the things again that's kind of come from all these conversations is that not say fearlessness, but that courage to in some ways just be firm in what you want to say. And Linton Stevens talked about it before when he said, it's about figuring out that thing you want to say, and then yes, the conviction to say it and framing it in a way that is as much as you can tell is different to what other folks have said in the past or are saying at this present moment, especially about things that are current and everyone's got an opinion, right? If you're in some ways trying to get your voice heard, it is about figuring out, okay, what's the angle that's true to me, but also I don't see many people going down that path, so how can I go down that path but also being true to myself, and doing it in a if you can in an art, because as I was talking about music and art in musical, however you interpret musical to be in that kind of way.
Absolutely, absolutely. Like, well said.
Yeah, not but yeah. It's these are I think these are like conversations that maybe in some ways could happen more with young people, in terms of we have that thing of yes, you have to learn how to compose, air quotes compose, how to create music on different devices, using different styles. But then there's that other thing of the activism side of things, which you do a lot in your music, talking about themes that are personal to you and personal to other people. That maybe for many young people, that is like, oh, I don't know if I can bring that, because what if someone thinks this, or what if someone says this, and what if I get cancelled, or what if this, and that's I think for many different people that becomes the stumbling block. That becomes a stumbling block to authenticity and for being yourself. It's what if I put this out there and either no one engages or they engage and I'm getting hate mail and people in my DMs saying, all sorts of horrible things, right? So how do you get not even get over it, because maybe there's an element of still feeling, shy or nervous about certain things. I don't know, but how do you find that process of finding something that you're passionate about, whether it's political or otherwise, putting it into your music, and then in a sense sitting back and seeing what happens?
I think for me, it's like you have to kind of detach yourself a little bit from a result you definitely want. Like, I think when I put my last album, Wow, which you've heard a song from just now, I had a lot of wants and needs that were really dominated by like folk at the I worked with some people at the time who had a very corporate mindset, and it just didn't suit my approach. And I ended up thinking about everything in terms of vanity metrics and numbers and streaming, and not like the quality of the way it would connect with my audience. And I ended up feeling very, disillusioned by music as a whole, putting that album out. But I let the album live out there for a little bit, and I realized that there's a more online audience who really love the album. And I've been incredibly lucky that my fans take what I do as seriously as I do. I mean, to give you an example, like, if you're at a gig and someone asks you to like sign their guitar, or someone's like, hey, I'm going to walk down the aisle to a song you've put out, stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's funny because when you write barbed songs against nationalism or the caste system or the stuff that I cover, having someone message you and go, oh, hey, I'm getting married to your song in a very Ed Sheeran way is a really hilarious way of going, you can have your cake and eat it too. Do you know what I mean? I wouldn't describe what I do as Ed Sheeran-y at all. And yet here's a very Ed Sheeran thing happening to me. I'm not filling arenas, but to have someone get married to your music is something that you would normally conflate with a singer like him, you know. But to be able to enjoy that myself without changing anything about the way I approach anything is great. And it can happen to you who's watching this as well. You just have to commit to what you're doing and figure out who's into it and how best to service their needs, I suppose. So staying detached from it is hard. Like when you sing against things like the caste system, you do get a lot of hate. You get a lot of people blocking you from opportunities, a lot of people just not letting you say what you're going to say because it's going to make them look bad, because it is bad a lot of the time, you know. And like for me, it's like you kind of have to accept that if you're going to say this stuff, it's going to come with the territory of disagreement at the mildest and hatred at the worst of it, right? And I think for me, I've been lucky that my fan base are so supportive of what I do. Like, you know, I remember the first time where I think somebody said that somebody said that they thought my music was awful and I shouldn't release anything again. And only people I didn't know were leaping in and like defending me. And it made me feel really like validated, which you shouldn't do in a sense, because internet clout comes and goes. You can't use that to validate your ability to exist here. But it was so surprising to know that I had built up all this stuff thinking for a time that nobody cared, but here's literal proof that people care because they're defending you, because they're so invested in your music that they're getting married to it, that they feel like a deep connection with it. And for me, I have my 2 albums out, my 3rd one that I'm working on, and it's like, you know, knowing that people care so much is incredible. And like, that gives me the fuel to tolerate the other stuff for sure. And I'm not saying that if you don't have a fan base, hate's going to happen and you won't survive it, because for a long time I was ignored. People didn't really know or care what I was doing. But you have to find a way to live, and if that's finding a frequency by which to do it, finding the right medium for your music, then take your time, you know, experiment. For me, I thought the old school model of a record deal, and you know, I mean, I have a team, like I have a lawyer and an agent and stuff like that, but I don't have a management team. I don't have a record label, all these traditional things you need to succeed. And yet, don't need any of these things. You know, I've got to like play around the world. I've got to play like some really iconic venues doing specifically the kind of music I make. And most importantly, I have a really engaged fan base. And a lot of the vanity metric stuff that my old team would give me hassle for have all come anyway. A lot of the time, once you relax on the ego and you just lean into the authenticity, that stuff comes. Because when people see you presenting the real you on camera, it makes them want to follow you. It makes them want to connect with who you are and learn about you. And, you know, a thing I'm doing a lot on my socials just now is a lot of the music I make is very indebted to South Indian classical music. For those who might be interested, there's a style of music called Carnatic music, which is traditionally played on fretless instruments, but I'm doing it on like a fretted one just to be difficult. But I play a lot of that kind of music on guitar. And the narrative behind it is my dad wanted me to hear that music a lot growing up. And he always worries that in moving me away from India into Scotland, I'm never going to experience the culture. I'm like, no, I mean, I spent hours every day playing the music you introduced me to. I think you did okay, Dad. But for me, I was vulnerable with my fan base, and I let them know that, hey, I'm letting you in on the fact that me connecting with my dad is kind of why I'm doing this. But they've all been so supportive. They've leapt on board, and like, you know, I've had so many great session and recording and gig opportunities just off the back of the fact that I was vulnerable with my audience. Never be afraid to be vulnerable would be my advice to any newer artists watching or listening to this. But be careful at the same time, because people take advantage and people can be awful to you just because someone's hurt them. And unfortunately, we live in that world. So yeah, I would say that it's been a hard journey trying to find a way around hate comments and, you know, doing a thing that's inherently very political, but the rewards wildly outweigh the cons, if you want, if you will. Like, I feel like the disadvantages do exist, and I've had really bad mental health days with it, but the good is so good that it absolutely makes up for it. So I hope that rambling answer hit some of the points you wanted raised.
Yeah, I think so. I think you've touched on a couple of really important points. It's just in that way of social media being that thing that, you know, for many of us, and I include myself to an extent as well, you know, you want to put something out there, and what we want, you know, that dopamine hit of just 100,000 likes and it going viral, and people like, oh my gosh, this is actually amazing. When reality is, yes, we know sometimes, you know, there's little engagement, sometimes low engagement, sometimes it's the wrong kind of engagement that you want, you know, sometimes it's great. But having that that reason for doing it all, is in many ways the intention behind what you're doing is really the key. And then when you're collaborating with others and you're finding other people who see the world maybe not exactly the same as you, but can support what you're doing and see the world in similar ways, you can form your communities, and then you, I think, in some ways become insulated and maybe, you know, from all of the negativity that might come, because you realize that you're not alone in feeling this or thinking about this or trying to put art out there that's going to change people's minds in a particular way. And I wish if we had more time, I would have asked you, because, you know, for a lot of young people listening or watching, hearing you say the word nationalism might be like, what on earth does that mean? You know, and hearing you say some of that, you know, talking about the caste system, etc., might be other people thinking, well, what does that mean? So I encourage you all. Unfortunately, we don't have time to do it, to go through it all today, to go and check it out and to have a look at some of the stuff.
To be honest, I like to break that stuff down in a really basic way on my own social media. So if you go follow me at my own name, I regularly do videos where I break down that stuff from the most basic level. So you could not know what I'm talking about, but at the end of the video, hopefully you'll have a little bit more context. So I go into this a lot of the time knowing full well that my stuff lyrically, you know, what I'm annoyed about, what I'm writing songs about could be difficult to understand, but it's easy enough to understand the idea that someone in a wheelchair can't stand for anything, let alone stand for like a specific cause. And if he's being, you know, attacked for not standing for that, that's not something that anyone can tolerate. And I'm hoping even a younger audience can understand that that's a grave issue and one we need to talk about. But honestly, thanks so much for letting me speak today. It means a whole lot. Like, to have a mouthpiece in any ways, a pleasure.
No, we appreciate you. We appreciate all you're doing. We appreciate the inspiration that you're giving, just by virtue of the fact that you're talking about things and putting it into your music and putting yourself like it's so important to do that, because there is so much negativity, you know, in the world. There's so much stuff that you can just scroll and it just doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
But people like yourself and even some of the others that we've spoken to today who are doing something in different ways because they believe in, you know, greater equality in whichever way it is, whether it's about disabled people, whether it's about you know, race, whether it's about gender, whatever it's about, we're doing trying to make life better for so many people around the world. It's incredible. It's commendable. We appreciate you. Thank you for taking the time out today to speak to us.
Have a lovely day, everyone. I'll see you soon. Okay.
Amazing. Take care.